These are the 10 toughest sailboats ever built, vessels that have survived hurricanes, rounded Cape Horn, and brought their crews home when lesser boats would have become coffins. Marketing claims and price tags mean nothing to the ocean, which only respects boats built to survive. Over the past 50 years, certain sailboats have proven themselves again and again in the world's harshest conditions, from the Westsail 32 that floated undamaged through the perfect storm, to modern aluminum expedition boats designed to punch through Antarctic ice. What these vessels share is uncompromising construction, proven offshore pedigrees, and survival stories that separate legend from hype. Today, we're counting down the 10 boats that earned the title of Bluewater Beast, not through marketing, but through survival. Our list begins in Sweden with a boat that circumnavigated 3.5 times without a single modification. 904 Monsun 31s rolled off the production line between the late 1970s and 1980s, making it one of the most successful offshore production boats of that era. One Monsun 31 stands above all the others though, and that's Kurt Björklund's Golden Lady, which completed 3.5 circumnavigations including a Cape Horn rounding. What makes this remarkable is that Björklund sailed a stock production vessel with no special strengthening and no custom reinforcement, just solid Swedish engineering and a capable skipper at the helm. That boat now sits in Sweden's Royal Maritime Museum as the first fiberglass vessel in the Swedish museum system. Hallberg-Rassy traces back to 1943, and when Harry Hallberg introduced the fixed windscreen on the 1966 Rasmus 35, his thinking was simple. No need to be soaking wet to enjoy sailing. That protected cockpit carried through to the Monsun, along with the distinctive blue rubbing strake and encapsulated fuel tanks in the deep keel that became company signatures. The company history gets interesting beyond sailing too. Rumor has it the CIA used a Hallberg-Rassy 49 for espionage operations in Alaska during the 1980s to monitor Soviet submarines, and more verifiably, an HR-62 showed up in James Bond's Quantum of Solace. Over 9,400 yachts have come out of Hallberg-Rassy's yard to date. On the used market, a Monsun 31 runs roughly 15,000 to 100,000 euros, which is a bargain for a proven circumnavigator. American Sailboat Hall of Fame inducted this next boat in 1992, and here's the thing. It's still in production today. William Krelock designed the Pacific Seacraft 37, and his credentials came the hard way. Back in 1956 and 57, a typhoon caught him in the South China Sea aboard a 110-foot schooner called Gloria Maris, and a 60-degree roll dismasted the vessel while he was aboard. Before his death in 2009, Krelock had designed an estimated 8,000 boats for various builders, and the Pacific Seacraft 37 might be his masterpiece. Production started in the early 1980s, and about 200 hulls exist today. The design combines a modern long fin keel with a skeg-hung rudder, which was progressive thinking wrapped in traditional aesthetics with a sweet shear line and canoe stern. Owners report surfing at 12 knots under bare poles in heavy weather, and that's not a typo. 12 knots with no sails up, just riding waves in a gale. Krelock understood that a good offshore boat needs to be repairable, not just strong. Every lesson from that typhoon survival shaped his designs, where everything is accessible, serviceable, and built to last. A new Pacific Seacraft 37 costs around $336,000 today, while used examples range from $100,000 to $230,000. For a Hall of Fame boat that can take you anywhere in the world, that price makes sense. The backstory on this next boat reads like fiction. Henri Amel fought with the French resistance in World War II. Combat left him crippled in one leg, blind in one eye, and nearly blind in the other. After fighting in Africa, he declared that his former self didn't exist anymore and changed his name to simply Amel. Allied invasion floating pontoons taught him about polyester resin, and that knowledge led him to start building boats in La Rochelle, France, in 1964, at age 50, with zero business experience. His philosophy was radical. Boats should come complete with everything needed for ocean cruising, with no options whatsoever. Customizing an Amel wasn't possible because Henri believed he knew exactly what an offshore sailor needed. The Super Maramu arrived in the 1990s and became his flagship, with 497 built in total. Standard equipment included a generator, dishwasher, washer-dryer, microwave, water maker, and even bathrobes and shopping carts. 4 watertight bulkheads provided exceptional safety, while electric furling on all sails pioneered push-button sailing. Cruising World named it Boat of the Year, and the design developed a legendary following that included the SV Delos YouTube channel, which used a Super Maramu as their original boat. Here's something worth knowing. Amel's proprietary blister barrier coating reportedly means no osmotic blisters have ever appeared on any Super Maramu, ever. Henri died in 2005 and left the company to his workers, where it remains 100% employee-owned today. $200,000 to $450,000 gets you a used Super Maramu. For a boat that comes with everything including bathrobes, that represents a lot of value. This next boat connects directly to cruising royalty. Lyle Hess designed the Bristol Channel Cutter after building his first boat at age 14 and spending World War II constructing torpedo boats for the British Navy. Born in 1913 and living until 2002, Hess drew inspiration from the Bristol pilot cutters, working boats from the UK's Bristol Channel, where the world's second highest tides create notoriously dangerous waters. Between 1976 and 2011, somewhere between 125 and 175 Bristol Channel cutters were built. 28 feet on deck stretches to 37 feet 9 inches when you include the bowsprit and boomkin, and 14,000 pounds of displacement with a 33% ballast ratio makes it a substantial small boat. But the Bristol Channel Cutter's greatest fame comes through Lynn and Larry Pardey. The Pardys commissioned Lyle Hess to design both their boats, Seraphin at 24 feet 7 inches and Taliesin at 29 feet 6 inches. 200,000 nautical miles passed beneath those two hulls without engines. That bears repeating, 200,000 miles with no engine aboard. No other couple has circumnavigated both eastabout and westabout on boats they built themselves, and Taliesin remains the smallest vessel to circumnavigate contrary to prevailing winds around all the great southern capes. Cape Horn tested them with a 50-foot wave knockdown, a near wreck in the Strait of Le Maire, and 3 days hove to in gale conditions. They made it through. Lynn Pardey's famous motto launched thousands of cruising dreams. Go small, go simple, but go now. Larry passed away in 2020 at age 80, and Lynn, now in her 80s, published a new book called Passages Cape Horn and Beyond in 2024. $50,000 to over $200,000 covers the range for used Bristol Channel cutters today. 41 of these boats exist in the world. Every single one is a collector's item, and the Swan 65 wrote the definitive early chapter of offshore racing. Finland's Notter Swan built them between 1973 and 1989, and Swan 65s dominated the early Whitbread round-the-world race like nothing before or since. Sayula the Senund won the inaugural Whitbread in 1973-74, skippered by Mexican businessman Ramon Carlin. Pre-race mockery labeled his crew lazy Mexicans with sombreros, and the team included his wife as cook on the first leg plus his son. Carlin didn't even insure the boat. They won anyway. Swan 65s collected 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th place finishes across 3 Whitbread races. Claire Francis became the first female Whitbread skipper in 1977-78, finishing 5th aboard ADC AccuTrack. What made the Swan 65 so capable? Racing performance combined with the construction quality Notter Swan has delivered since 1966. A dedicated teak hunter handpicks wood for veneers, and foam-cored fiberglass hulls get epoxy and carbon fiber reinforcement. Here's a statistic that says everything about Swan as a company. Nearly 100% of all Swans ever built remain sailing today. Over 2,000 yachts have left their yard, and almost all of them still touch water. Swan 65s command collector prices when they surface on the market, which doesn't happen often given that only 41 were ever made. Modern expedition sailing starts with a boat designed for ice. Jimmy Cornell shaped the Garcia Exploration 45 alongside designer Olivier Racoupeau, and this was no marketing collaboration. Cornell is the legendary circumnavigator who organized the ARC rallies and logged over 200,000 miles, and he needed a boat capable of going places most sailboats can't reach. 2015 saw Cornell sail his Exploration 45 Aventura 4 through the Northwest Passage from west to east via Bellot Strait. That's not cruising, that's expedition sailing through some of the most dangerous waters on Earth. Marine-grade aluminum 5 to 12 millimeters thick forms the hull, and features include a centerboard for shoal draft capability, twin rudders, ice-strengthened stems, and collision bulkheads fore and aft. About 60 have been built. Garcia Yachts of France started in 1974 and built their reputation on aluminum expedition vessels. Pete Goss carries the brand ambassador title, and he earned serious credibility when he rescued a fellow competitor mid-race in the Southern Ocean during the Vendée Globe. 500,000 euros and up gets you a new build, and that price reflects the reality that if your sailing plans include Antarctica, the Northwest Passage, or Patagonian glaciers, the Garcia Exploration 45 was designed exactly for those destinations. Every rule of traditional cruiser design got broken in 1973 when a 27-year-old naval architect named Bob Perry invented an entirely new category. Typical cruisers of that era carried displacement-to-length ratios around 400, but Perry's new design came in at 260, which was radical. A racing boat's underbody merged with a cruiser's livability, creating what we now call the performance cruiser. Production ran from 1973 to 2011, and exactly 200 hulls exist, just under 40 feet with displacement between 22,000 and 24,000 pounds, solid fiberglass construction up to an inch thick at the keel, and a fin keel with skeg-hung rudder make this boat proof that safety and speed can coexist. Perry himself established that a true Bluewater boat should be 5 to 6 times as strong as needed for normal conditions, and the Valiant 40 delivered on that promise. The circumnavigation record tells the story. Mark Schrader completed the first American solo non-stop circumnavigation via all 5 Great Capes in 1983, covering over 27,000 miles in 199 days, aboard hull number 252 named Resourceful. That stood as the fastest solo circumnavigation ever completed at the time. Bill Pinkney became the first black American to solo circumnavigate via all capes, also in a Valiant 40. Francis Stokes crossed the finish line as the first American monohull in the 1976 O-Star transatlantic race. Perry's innovation, a tumble-home canoe stern inspired by a yacht called Holger Danske, pulled volume aft without creating the pinch stern of traditional double-enders, which gave excellent following sea behavior while maintaining interior space. Shopping for a Valiant 40 requires knowing some history. Hulls numbered 120 through 249, built between 1976 and 1981, used Hetron fire-retardant resin that causes severe blistering, sometimes up to 10 inches in diameter, both above and below the waterline. Texas-built boats, hull numbers 267 through 300, command premium prices for good reason. $90,000 to $285,000 covers used Valiant 40s today. When asked what boat he'd choose for voyaging, Perry said he'd probably take a Valiant 40. That's the designer betting on his own creation. This next boat exists because its founder couldn't find a production boat that met his safety standards, so he built an entire company to solve the problem. Dick Beaumont has logged over 100,000 offshore miles, and his research uncovered something troubling. World Sailing documents at least 90 keel bolt failures, including high-profile sinkings. Cheeky Rafiki went down in 2014 due to keel failure and took 4 lives with it. The actual number of keel bolt failures runs much higher since most boats sink too fast for anyone to investigate. Here's the dirty secret of sailboat construction. The keel, which is the heaviest single component on the boat, typically attaches with bolts, and those bolts can fail. When they do, the boat goes down fast. Kraken's answer is the zero keel. Lead ballast gets encapsulated within an integral fiberglass fin keel that's molded as part of the hull during layup, which means 0 bolts and 0 failure points. 130 degrees of angle of vanishing stability exceeds comparable production cruising yachts, And that's the point where a capsized boat rights itself rather than staying turtle. The Alpha rudder system delivers similar protection through a full-depth skeg integral to the hull that supports the rudder through 3 bearings with emergency steering built in. Beaumont commissioned the first Kraken 66, named White Dragon, in 2016, sailed her to the Mediterranean via the Cape of Good Hope, and founded the company when admirers who saw the boat kept asking where they could get one. Beaumont stays refreshingly honest about boat design, saying, "There is no such thing as one yacht for all purposes. You cannot have the best of all worlds, whatever the salesman tells you." Kraken produces the 50, 58, and 66 models, competing in the premium segment alongside boats like Oyster, and they've earned that positioning through engineering rather than just marketing. Understanding why this boat earned the number 2 spot requires knowing about one of the deadliest yacht races in history. August 1979 brought the Fastnet race, and 303 boats crossed the starting line. Then, Depression Low Y arrived, intensifying into Force 10 and Force 11 winds with 40 to 50-foot breaking seas. 15 competitors died before it ended. 75 boats capsized. More than 18 rolled completely 360 degrees. 5 went to the bottom. Investigators discovered something remarkable in the aftermath. The Contessa 32 was the only small boat to finish. The reason comes down to angle of vanishing stability, which is the point at which a capsized boat rights itself. 156 degrees of AVS protected the Contessa 32, while the typical half-tonners racing that day had about 117 degrees. That 39-degree gap was literally the margin between life and death. Grimalkin's story stands among the most harrowing from that race. 17-year-old Matthew Shahan watched his father die after multiple 360-degree rolls, and 3 survivors abandoned ship. Crew member Nick Ward stayed alone on the wreck, believing he'd been left to die, an experience he later recounted in his book, Left for Dead. ISO 2217-2 stability standards and mandatory safety equipment requirements trace directly back to that disaster and still govern offshore racing today. The investigation produced one critical finding. None of the yachts that hove to were capsized. Boats that kept racing got overwhelmed, while boats that stopped and waited out the storm survived. Years later, sailor and author John Kretschmer took his Contessa 32 Gigi around Cape Horn against prevailing winds in 1984. A knockdown to 130 degrees threw Kretschmer overboard, but his harness flipped him back aboard. His verdict afterward: "We were in way over our heads, and it was the Contessa 32 which bailed us out time and again. Luck didn't save the Contessa 32 in 1979. Better design for survival did, and that remains true today." The most famous Bluewater cruiser ever built takes the top spot on our list. William Creelock designed it, and 834 Westsail 32s came off the line between 1971 and 1981. 32 feet of boat displacing 19,500 pounds with a 36% ballast ratio adds up to something built like a tank. Hand-laid fiberglass half an inch to a full inch thick forms the hull, and the design traces back to Colin Archer Norwegian pilot and rescue boats built for the Bristol Channel, where the world's second highest tides test everything that floats. Time magazine ran a 4-page spread on the cruising life in June 1973 and made the Westsail 32 famous, but October 1991 built its legend. During what we now call the perfect storm, a Westsail 32 named Satori got caught 75 miles south of Nantucket in hurricane-force conditions. 2 complete knockdowns followed. The Coast Guard rescued the crew in a dramatic operation that became part of the book and movie. And the boat? Satori washed ashore on Maryland's Assateague Island with no structural damage whatsoever, not a single crack or failure. Cruising circles said it best afterward: the crew was the weak link, not the boat. More recently, Jerome Rand completed a 271-day solo non-stop circumnavigation in 2017 and 2018 aboard his Westsail 32 Mighty Sparrow, rounding all 3 Great Capes. His water supply dropped to just 2 gallons in the Indian Ocean, and he lost nearly 40 pounds during the voyage. His reasoning for choosing a Westsail was simple. I wasn't trying to break any speed records. I just wanted to get around safely. Westsails do carry a reputation for sailing slowly, and people say they're built like a tank and sail like one too. Owners push back on that characterization though, and the design's circumnavigation record speaks for itself. $20,000 to $149,000 covers the range for Westsail 32s on the used market today. For a boat that survived the perfect storm without a scratch, that's a bargain. What connects these 10 Bluewater beasts? Price isn't the answer since we covered boats ranging from $20,000 to over $1 million. Country of origin doesn't explain it either, with Sweden, Finland, France, Britain, and America all represented. Construction material isn't the thread since both fiberglass and aluminum made this list. Proven performance in conditions that break lesser boats ties them together. The Westsail 32 earned its reputation by floating undamaged through the perfect storm. 75 boats capsized around the Contessa 32 in the 1979 Fastnet, and it kept sailing. The Valiant 40 created a category by proving safety and speed can coexist. An amateur crew that experts dismissed took a Swan 65 and won the first Whitbread. Marine surveyor Steve Madden, with over 30,000 offshore miles behind him, puts it this way: don't buy the biggest boat you can afford. Buy the smallest one you're prepared to live aboard. Lynn Parday, who sailed 200,000 miles without an engine, made it even simpler. Go small, go simple, but go now. Centuries of ocean testing have shaped these boats, and these 10 have passed that test again and again. They earned their place as Bluewater beasts not through marketing, but through survival. If you learned something new about these legendary sailboats, hit that subscribe button and join the Nautic crew. We cover the boats, the sailors, and the stories that make Bluewater sailing one of the last great adventures. Drop a comment below and tell us which boat on this list you'd take across an ocean, and we'll see you in the next one.